Right, Halla, it is the time for questions and questions. It is time. What is the first story you wrote which meant something to you?
Oh, now that's a tricky one. Obviously, finishing the Wild Gods Gambit was a major thing. But if I
Yeah.
leave that aside, after I'd written that, I started writing some prequel stories for it.
Ooh.
And one of the main characters is Belian the Bard. And I wanted to write about songs, songwriting, performing, communicating. And so I wrote this prequel story called The Right Song. And it's really important to me because it's about making connections. And he's trying to make a connection with the hero of the Last War, first man through the London Breach. And so he writes a song for him about his heroics. And he gets to perform it to the man in person, but also in front of the king. And so there's an interesting dynamic going on there. But after that, there's something happens where he has to come up with another song straight away, and it has to be the right song. And so you'd have to read the story to find out if it is.
Is this the one that people can get by subbing to your newsletter?
I think it will be by the time this goes out. At the moment, I've got a different prequel story on there called Unfinished Business that anyone who's subscribed so far will have. But I think I'm going to put the right song on there because I've been thinking more and more about it and how important that one is to me. And I think that would be a really good taster. So by the time the podcast goes out, yes, that will be the story that people get.
So the structure of the idea of writing a story for someone about their exploits and then wanting to share it with them. What was your inspiration for that, do you think?
I think we all struggle with telling people that we like in whatever way we like them, how important they are to us. And so the idea of doing it through song in such a public way felt quite high stakes to me.
Yeah.
So that's where the inspiration for that came, about expressing yourself and being honest.
Have you ever written? This might be too personal. Have you ever written a song for somebody?
I haven't. Do you know? No, that's a lie. I absolutely have. It's a friendship song called "Swim the Same Deeps." I write the lyrics and Terry Dunbar writes the music. We're in an acoustic duo called Halla. And through lockdown and going to the open mic, I've made some wonderful friends, really, really wonderful friends. Particularly Patricia Needham stands out. We're often mistaken for each other. That's how kindred spirit we are.
Oh, wow.
So we call ourselves the Pala because she's Pat and I'm Halla, so we are the Pala. And I wrote this song, Swim the Same Deeps, mostly with her in mind, but everybody really. But we're strange, we're funny, we can be downhearted. It's definitely a Pat and Halla line.
Lovely. And people can, have you got some stuff online that people can hear your duo?
We've got some old stuff on SoundCloud. So if you look up Telhalla, Telhalla, on SoundCloud, you can hear some old stuff. But we've got to get some of the new stuff up because we've been doing this for a while now and we have not updated it. So that was very early on. And my voice has developed so much and my performance over the years. I've been doing this about 10 years now.
So that's something that you both might need to explain to me a little bit. A voice can develop. Is that a common thing?
A lot of it's kind of finding your sound.
Oh, like sort of finding your voice in writing. It's a similar sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's learning what your boundaries are, then learning how to better utilize what you've got in place, and a lot of times, like, you can get more maturity in your voice and more emotion, and it's just
you can stretch your range, and you can try out different tones and see what's most suitable for what you're actually trying to communicate, because for me, song singing is about storytelling. I choose songs that have a character or a story because that's what I like to deliver, and I like to not be myself. That comes from my acting days. I like to be a character on stage.
Yeah,
Lose yourself in the
same.
character.
Hmm.
Have you encountered a folk band? They're quite famous in the UK, called Show of Hands.
No, I know a theatre company called Show of Hands, but not a.
I feel like you
not a
might get
folk
on with
band.
them because the primary sort of songwriter for them is very much a storyteller in his
Yeah.
craft. A guy called Steve Knightley, who they're a wonderful duo. The other guy's called Phil Beer. I've seen them many times, and I'll be taking Nico next year to see them in their final tour.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think you might get on with them. Just on
I
the
will
voice,
check that out then.
yeah, please do. The Cousin Jack would be a good place to start there,
Oh,
or
yes. Oh, I love
potentially what's it called, Galway Farmer or something, Galway Bay, something like that. No, that's an Ed Sheeran song, isn't it? It's something along those lines. Have a deep dive on it because I think you'll really like it.
Will.
Just on the voice thing, I'm actually interested in this because I when I was growing up, I listened to a lot of rock and in particular stuff like folk metal, and you hear and sort of other kinds of metal. So when I think about people's voices changing as they go through their career as a singer, it's more typical that they are blowing their voice out. You know,
Yeah.
they become raspy. You know, they've pushed it too far. So is that just from like repeated touring and you know no breaks between performances and things like that does that? Do you think?
Also, just not proper care.
Right.
It's especially in rock and metal. If you're not doing it right, it's really easy to do things like develop vocal polyps and just ruin yourself. It's just a sad truth.
Oh, sounds rough. But like from a layman's perspective, I have no idea about this kind of thing. So this is absolutely fascinating for me.
Oh,
Think about someone like Kate Bush. Her voice has got much lower over the years, and I think that's natural. Your voice changes in the way your skin does and the way your hair does. it ages.
It's like any other muscle, isn't it? It just gets weaker as you get older.
Well, I found, because I've only just started my vocal journey as a singer rather than as an actor, that my voice has got much stronger in the decade I've been doing it, and I've got much more ability to adapt it to things like much more harder rocky stuff, as well as the light lyrical stuff that I maybe would be more expected
lovely.
to deliver.
So when you are just to jump us away from singing for a moment, when you were writing your novel and also your stories, for example, the one that you told on the last episode, what is your editing process?
I tend to write better later in the day. So in the morning, I will edit what I wrote the day or night before I move on, because that gets me back deep into the characters, etc.
Okay.
And I feel like I'm back in the moment. I have to put myself back in the head. It's the same as acting. You have to kind of get into character. So my first drafts are quite clean in terms of the way things are expressed and where things are going. I tend to not do much big editing. But I do like to add more action, look at pacing. I'm quite an underwriter. I write very sparely at first, particularly because I've not got a strong visual imagination. So that's something I have to address deliberately. I mean, one of the things my mum, bless her, said when she heard my rehearsal for Silver Tongue was that she couldn't visualise the characters because I hadn't given very much information about what they look like. And I think that's really common for me, but it's also, again, an acting thing, is that anyone can take on that role. You can put yourself into that.
So I don't want to get too wanky, to use a term we've often used on here.
We use that term a lot, actually.
We do.
Maybe we're just wanky.
In the actory stuff, but you've got a kind of very Stanislavskian approach to it then. Getting back in, where was I before? Where am I going? Anyone can inhabit this if it's done correctly. I kind of dig that in a big way. Although the opposite would be Brechtian writing, and I guess that would just be hand someone a pen and be like, "You're the author now." So I don't really know how that would work.
It'll be my hold, and you can do it from the outside in instead of the inside out.
I think
Is
this
this what
book's
you feel
writing
like?
me.
Is this what you feel like when we talk about things like history and stuff like that, Nico? Because I didn't
Yes.
understand half of those words. I think some of them were people's names. Is that correct?
It was. For the listeners, just go and read into it because it's good fun. But there are quite a few accepted principles on how to approach characters, and Bertolt Brecht had possibly my favourite, which is if you put on a hat, you can be a different person, essentially. So an actor in a scene could swap hats, and you can just accept that they're a different person now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas
The
Stanislavski's,
storytelling's very overt in Brecht.
yeah,
You
and
know you're watching a play the whole time.
whereas Stanislavski's about sort of really inhabiting people. You should know where they were before they walked on stage and where they're going when they walk off, and about really finding truth in the scene. And
Yes.
I feel like I would lean towards the Stanislavski one. That one.
you would.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm glad that we discovered
As
that.
a man who likes a method actor, I think you would very much.
Oh,
so.
so that's right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
then.
that's method.
Yes. Yeah. Seems like the way to do it. What's the
yeah.
old the Laurence Olivier thing? The dear boy, why not simply just act? Don't actually have to go and run.
That just makes me think of the Ian McKellen guest spot on the show Extras.
Oh,
When
yeah.
he said, Peter Jackson called me and he said, "Could you play Gandalf the Wizard?" And I said, "You do know I'm not really a wizard, don't you?" He said, "No, I want you to pretend to be Gandalf." I said, "Oh, I could do that."
Oh, fantastic! So, editing in the morning in order to get you in the groove, in order to
Yes.
write in the evening. That's
Yes.
fascinating. I like that. I like that a lot, actually. So, I want you to now imagine that you are stumbling down some not badly stumbling, but just sort of stumbling along a sort of rocky path in the
Mhm.
middle of absolutely nowhere. There are trees swaying violently in a heavy breeze. It's sort of getting towards that kind of twilight hour, and then the sky suddenly darkens, and there's a zip of silver light above you, and in sort of Silver Age sci-fi fashion, a UFO dangles above you as though it's suspended on strings. You're then zipped up into the sky and appear in front of an alien who says this.
Hello.
Hello.
It's okay, I understand you when you speak. Are you getting this? Am I coming through clearly in my human translator?
Quite clearly, thank you.
Good. Now, simple offer. I will either probe you, this fellow here, new one, extra long, or you could give me a book that I may read to better understand you. What book would you like to give me, or is it perhaps the probe?
I will be very happy to give you a book that absolutely delighted me in my early journey as a reader of fantasy, because that will help you to understand me far better, far better than any probe could. And it is The Summer Tree by Guy Gavriel Kay, which is the first book in the Fionnavar Tapestry series, where a group of university students pass through into Fionnavar. And it is a wonderful, beautifully written novel about growth, sacrifice, understanding yourself in a new context, and it just really opened my eyes to the possibilities of fantasy moving into it as an adult medium from my love of it as a child. And so it made me cry, it made me think, it made me grow. And so if you were an Australian, sir, or whatever you would like me to call you, if you were to read The Summer Tree by Guy Gavriel Kay, I think you'd have a much better understanding.
I am incapable of crying, but I can learn about myself. And you.
Hooray! Let's all get to know each other better. What book
It's
should
just-
I have to find out about you?
Great question.
Well, I think war and peace, but stop halfway. I'm not into the whole peace thing.
Oh, that little grey bastard. He's a cheeky minx.
I am. I'm going to open the trap door now, and you will land with a bump. Goodbye.
Hey, I'm back from definitely not pretending to be an alien. Anything cool happen while I was gone?
So, there was a probing. So, do you read this every so often, or was it sort of like you've read it, it was seminal, it changed you, and then you haven't touched it again since?
I don't go back. I just
Ooh.
I don't know what I'd think of it if I went back, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
I'm not a big rereader anyway.
I was going to say, is there
I
anything
don't
you go
really
back to?
rewatch films a lot either. There's a few things like The Princess Bride that I watch regularly.
Classic.
That's
Highlander,
fair.
Terminator 2. So there are
I've-
just a few,
yeah.
but really books no. I've got such a big TBR, not enough years left in my lifespan. So moving forward on books, really.
I've actually not seen Highlander.
Wow.
Don't quite know how I missed that one.
That's I think you'd enjoy it.
It's hard not to enjoy it. It's got a Queen soundtrack, and
Really?
it's got Sean Connery doing his usual voice but pretending to be a Spanish Egyptian.
This the least believable line in the history of cinema is him saying, "Watch Haggis," as though a man with that accent doesn't know.
The only actual Scots person in the whole thing.
Oh yeah, you got Christophe Lambert playing
Yeah.
Scotsman.
Isn't that what you do to desserts?
Yes, yeah, go Christopher Lambert. But yeah, it's just fantastic. Sean Connery is great value in that movie. I'm not
He really
Spanish.
is.
I'm Egyptian. You're neither, and we can tell. Stop it, you silly man. But fabulous outfits.
Is this the one where he's wearing like a Borat one piece mankini?
No,
No.
that's Zardoz.
Oh right, so that did happen. That wasn't just inside my head. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, super weird movie Zardoz, by the way. It's named that because the remaining culture that float around in a giant head worship a poster that's mostly worn away for the Wizard of Oz, and Zardoz is all that you can still read on it.
What the
Very
No, I have
weird
not seen that and
movie.
did not know that, and that's interesting. I might have to search that out.
Save yourself some time. Watch the 20-minute Rick and Morty episode based on it. You'll get the same idea.
Okay, that would probably help me out. But just as a side point, the accent I did in Silver Tongue was a sort of amalgamation of lots of different accents, and there's a line that relates to it in Highlander where they say, "You talk funny. Where are you from?" And he goes, "Lots of different places."
Yeah. Just a great film. Great film. Incredible delivery on some very questionable lines. I'd highly recommend it to
I'm in.
anyone who hasn't seen it. Right, come on. We're straying too far from the path. There have been Highlanders, there are aliens, all sorts of things. So, other authors, who inspires you?
So many, so many. I think the first writer who made me go, right, I want to do this, is Jenny Wirtz, because I read the book she did with Raymond Feist, The Daughter of the Empire, Servant of the Empire, Mistress of the Empire. And the main character, Mara, is just this incredibly rich, interesting person. And I just thought, I want to explore characters like that, where I can show women doing interesting things in fantasy in a way that you don't always see. There's a lot of braid flipping and foot stomping women in fantasy. And seeing somebody who wasn't either a hair flipping foot stomper or a sword wielding hard nose was really informative for me. Lots of other women writers at that time: Sherry Tepper, Mary Gentle, C.J. Chera. The series that blew me away was the Malazan Book of the Fallen by Stephen Erickson, and that was my second kind of moment of, oh, I want to write like this. I mean, I know I can't write like that, but that was inspirational. But the one I'm most close to in terms of thinking, well, yeah, this might be the kind of writing that is achievable for me and desirable for me to fit in with this kind of model. It's actually Joe Abercrombie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I really enjoy his writing, and he's such a nice guy. And so that whole way of approaching writing and engaging with the writing community is something, yeah, I'd like to model myself on.
It sounds like you're really dyed in the wool a fantasy reader and writer in a big way. So what leans you? Because you know you mentioned people like Feist and these kind of people, but slightly more sort of like high fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of leans you in Joe Abercrombie's more kind of grimdark, low fantasy?
Yeah, I don't think there's a real difference.
No,
in terms of, well, particularly, I don't, if you'd said to me, is there much magic in Joe Abercrombie's Blade itself, etc., I wouldn't have realised there wasn't. I mean, you've got a mage, you've got stuff going on. The people are what's important for me, and the extraordinary circumstances. So as soon as you set it in a fantasy world, that's fantasy for me. It's a secondary world. That's high fantasy, as far as I'm concerned. I don't distinguish really. I don't think.
no. I guess there isn't really much point in doing that. If you love it all, I guess some people like some elements of fantasy more than others. Like for myself, like I like magic with a high cost, which Abercrombie captures very well. Like magic is dangerous in Abercrombie's world, whereas potentially something like Harry Potter, for example. You've got kids practicing spells together, and there's no it doesn't cost them anything to do a spell. Typically, they just sort of say the right words in the right order.
That would have been a great twist if it had turned out that it did.
Yeah.
Congratulations on finishing Hogwarts. By the way, every spell you cast knocks 45 minutes off your lifespan.
Yeah.
Bye! Oh my god, I've been practicing all week.
Dumbledore's only a senior.
I'm 21, you know.
But yeah, no, I like that. I like that approach. A holistic fantasy reader and writer. Just everything.
I'm not hugely a fan of urban fantasy or anything that takes place kind of even partly within our world. I know I said Fiona of Our Tapestry is a portal fantasy, and it is, but on the whole, I'd rather leave our world much further behind so that I can be free to see this as, the impossible, but also just immerse myself in it a bit more.
So only because it came up in our last episode actually. Do you have a favourite fantasy race? It's one I love asking because I'm a dwarf man through and through. So is there, especially in sort of like tabletop role play or fantasy stories, is there a people that calls to you?
Oh, well, when I wrote The Wild God's Gambit, I made my main character have Fae lineage. So I think that idea of the kind of strange, dangerous, trickish kind of people who can be anything and can be utterly unknowable was a really nice way in for me to think about taking a new stance on something myself.
I like that a lot. I think the Fae are always really interesting. That whole, don't tell them your real name. And for the love of God, if they offer you anything, read the fine print.
Right, fine print, absolutely.
One of my favorite novels for that was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell on Norrell.
Love that.
Obviously, that's still sort of set in our world in a bit, sort of, isn't it? It's sort of a bit different. But Susanna Clarke absolutely absolutely nailed that. That horrendous trickster nature of the Fae is captured pretty much perfectly for me in that. What a great concept. Have you ever associated a song or a piece of music with one of your characters?
Firstly, I've got to say, I was really inspired by Robin of Sherwood to write The Wild Gods Gambit, the BBC TV series from the 80s. Michael Praed as Robin, because they had that whole kind of mystical spirits in the forest, and the hunter, the horned kind of. This guy had carrying the horned god's power, and that was really inspirational for me in writing the Wild Gods Gambit.
Yeah,
because the gods take avatars in my world.
I think this is one of the few Robin Hood adaptations that I've not seen.
Check it out.
Before my time. It looks 80s as fuck. It looks great.
It does, and it absolutely is. But it's the wonderful 80s, not the cheesy, corny 80s. It's not cheesy like Hercules or Xena, which I love both of those. But it's not that. It's mystical. It's very magical, and the Clannad soundtrack's hugely influential on that. So their track "Hern the Hunter" inspired the book quite a lot. But in terms of one of my characters is quite an elegant and also quite a socially awkward mercenary called Westor, and my favourite local band, the Dusk Brothers, wrote a song called "The Damage Done." I'm not leaving till the morning comes. I'm not paying for the damage done, and I just that it's quite a heavy driving beat, and it just gave me the feel of this sort of very, very passionate character. And so yes, it's that. It's The Damage Done by the Dusk Brothers was very Westor for me.
One to check out.
Brothers.com. They're awesome.
Do you find that as someone who also creates music, has it gone the other way for you at all? Where, you're writing a character and you think, there's a song in this, there's something here, even if it's just a little refrain. Do you ever find those two sort of creative paths aligning?
I did write song lyrics for the Wild Gods Gambit. There's stories in there, and there's a song in there. There's a ballad in there. And there's also what's the word for it? Riddle. There's a riddle in there as well. So I've written a lot of things for that world.
Cool.
And yeah, one of the because the Wild Gods Gambit, she, the Fey woman in the story, has to not use her voice because she senses it's something very powerful, and she doesn't speak. But she really enjoys sound, and she hears the guy takes her in. She hears him singing, and she kind of thinks to herself, "Well, why doesn't he mind singing in public? Because I think it's a very private thing." But she's able to kind of be taken away to somewhere else by it. And I really do like the idea of songs coming out of stories. I think that's really important.
It's very sort of entrenched in the sort of Tolkien tradition, perhaps. There's lots of beautiful songs in Lord of the Rings, and
yeah. My agent wanted me to cut the ballad right down, but I wouldn't.
It's
first of all, no.
Just imagining being a fly on the wall in that meeting. Just, you've got to cut the ballad. I won't.
I won't.
I shall cut you for it.
The ballad stayed because it actually has a meaning that will become apparent in later books. So I wanted to keep it in. And people can, people skip things. If they're not into it, they can skip it. It's not that serious. I don't skip anything if I'm reading. But people do.
People do. I have done it on occasion. I think when a book's fully grabbed you, that it can command your entire attention, I think.
I once watched someone who was reading The Watchmen for the first time, get to a bit where it wasn't pictures anymore, and just skip until it started being pictures again. Instead of reading all the lovely in-betweeny bits from Watchmen, and it made me really sad.
Somewhere Alan Moore shed a single tear.
We all shed one with him.
It made one of his enormous chair leg joints fizzle for just a moment.
I would absolutely love to split a joint with Alan Moore. Yeah, I wouldn't be the same afterwards. It would
I would
change
miss
me.
you.
Yeah, you'd have to, I think. Come out like
down in his wizard cave.
I would become a wizard.
Oh. So when you are writing things, are there any tropes that you actively avoid?
Well, I've already talked about hair tossing and foot stomping.
Yes.
The other one is the wise mentor. I know you need that role in some respect, but to fully buy into that, I just don't. People who've lived a long time are still not totally at one with themselves.
Yeah.
People still have prejudices and flaws and misconceptions, and they can have a bad day. And so this kind of wise, kindly older person, just I can't leave that one alone. I mean, I can't leave many tropes alone, really. I like to take my own stance on them, but that's one that really just upsets me a little bit.
Are there any exceptions that prove the rule? Like, do you permit a Yoda, or do you see him, you little green bastard?
Or do you permit a bias out of interest?
Ooh, I permit a Yoda because have you seen Seagull's Stop It Now, the bad lip reading version?
Yes.
It just absolutely shows that, Yoda hitting R2-D2 with the stick and things. That is not the classic wise old mentor. That is an irascible kind of deliberately, mischievous kind of
curmudgeonly
person.
little green bugger.
Yeah, and he's little and green and rides around on Luke's back, and it's just that is not your standard wise mentor.
What about have you seen Avatar: The Last Airbender?
No.
So there's a character called Uncle Iroh in that, who I think is actually a very good version of it, but it's mostly because he's he has quite a dark history of having been a sort of commander in the military and committed quite a lot of atrocities, and is now mostly just trying to get his nephew to stop being a bastard, which I think is the right place for that sort of character to be.
Yes. Where the lived experience has a particular thing of, I won't let this happen to anybody else, to the point where, I mean, in my stories, it would probably lead them to do something that wasn't the right thing.
Yeah.
I have that. Have had that experience, and wisdom doesn't always make you do the right thing, I don't think. But and I think it's interesting if it doesn't. Having a mentor that's just right all the time doesn't do it for me.
Yeah, I can see that. I think you need to have some flaws, don't you? I mean, even Gandalf's got some flaws to him.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you mentioned earlier that you like to put your own spin on things, take your own stance on these kind of like tropes and archetypes and stuff. I think that's very important, isn't it? Because you can't just insert archetypes and expect a story to work through, a hero's journey or something, and people to read it, because that's been told, it's done.
Yeah.
So it has to be its own way. The reason I mentioned bias is because I really enjoyed Inverted Gandalf the first time that I read him.
Clever.
And when you were mentioning Abercrombie earlier, I just sort of thought that might have been one of the things that appealed to you about him. But fantastic! It's I'm really enjoying your take on the fantasy genre and your approach to writing, and I really enjoyed your concept about editing in the morning. That I feel like that's going to have some use for me, because sometimes you just have those days where you just don't really want to.
And
Um,
editing it is at least you can do the mechanical bit. You can proofread
you're right.
it
It's
at
mechanical,
the very
or at least it
least.
can be. It can be mechanical.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. So, what's your next project? Do you think? After the sub goes, will it be a continuation of this series, or do you have other things in the works or ideas?
I'm dying to write book 2, but I don't dare because if book 1 doesn't sell, you can't sell book 2.
No,
So I'm
start it
writing.
threateningly.
Sorry?
Start it threateningly. Just
Start it
message them. Say,
threateningly.
so I hope you're most of the way through that one because I have started number 2.
So, if an editor likes it but they want changes made and it's something fundamental to the story,
Yeah.
and you've started book 2 straight after book 1, which is where I would start it, then it might have knock-on effects on what you've written for that as well. So that's an enormous change if it's going to echo through into the book that you're writing now.
That's very wise.
So I started a mystery called The Twilight Palace. And I was really enjoying that, and then my agent didn't like it. So I switched to a prequel to The Wild God's Gambit called The Sharper Path. And it's all non-humans on a world before they came to the world that the Wild God's Gambit set on. But it's the same god as the horned god Abaddon, but back on the original world during the War of the Gods that destroyed that world.
So, with writing a prequel, is there a chance that you could do to yourself what you're worried the editor may do by changing
Okay.
something fundamental in the prequel? And they're thinking, "Oh, piss! I need to make sure that stays in the actual book 1, where this would be book 0."
Yes. Well, I'm free to do that before it's published.
That's
Now's
true.
the time.
Send
How
a
was
long letter to the publisher.
this is quite treat this question however you want to take it, really. But what has your experience of being out on submission been like so far? Have you? We've heard from loads and loads of writers, and they all have everybody's got these stories about how it took them some time, or this was
Taking
rejected. That was
ages. It's taking
yeah.
ages. It took about. We were expecting to hear within about 6 weeks from somebody, but actually it took about more like 4 months to hit anything. And then really nice rejections started to roll in. And then nothing for ages. So there are people who haven't said no, who are still reading it, but a year has passed, so it might well be dead. But it might not be. So we don't know. And you've got to dust your hands and forget about it, because if you're all constantly waiting for news, you're spending energy that I honestly don't have.
Yeah. No, I mean, and also, that doesn't gain you anything, does it? Even in just with that process of the submission and working on that series, but it must be the mental fortitude to have, for a start, written something of that length and poured as much as you have into it, and then to sort of have to just sort of float it on the ocean and see if a fish bites it or whatever. It's tricky, and power to you. It's a very brave thing to do, and
I felt very good about it, and I was glad I'd come from a background where I was familiar with rejection, because as an actor, if you don't fit, you don't fit, and that kind of rejection is actually really helpful, because it's the same with writing. It doesn't matter how good your book is. If it's not the right thing for them at that time, they're not going to say yes. So you don't need to take it personally if they don't want it. You can say, all right, I wasn't the right fit on this occasion. Maybe I'll luck out with somebody else, and they will get it and they will want it because it doesn't conflict with what they've already got on their list. And they were able to convince all the marketing people and the head of the publishing house, because for them it was something that hit the right tone, or that was similar to something they've had that's successful before. You just don't know what the factors are going to be, and you can't control it, and you can only write the best book you can. and send it out there and hope it clicks with somebody. That's all you can do. And there's no point criticizing yourself or punishing yourself if it doesn't go anywhere, because just write the next thing and get on and enjoy what you're doing. And if success comes, great. And if it doesn't, at least you haven't wasted all that energy being negative and self-criticizing.
Agreed. Well, we heard a fantastic story from you in the last episode, and it's clear that you're on the path. So keep going. I'm very, very keen to hear more about where you get to, and when your books start getting published and all the rest of it. Just give us a shout and come back on, tell us another story, some more prequels, some more, weave it through.
If our lovelies want to follow along, find out where you are, so they know where they can buy the book when it gets published, because it's gonna. Where can they find you online?
So the best place to go is hallawilliams.net. That's HALLAWILLIAMS.net. And join my mailing list, which I will not spam you stuff. I very rarely send anything out, just if there's something pertinent. So very rarely.
Pertinent stuff is a great idea for a great name for a newsletter. Pertinent stuff.
I'm also, I heard on
Can
the.
I have that, or are you
grapevine-
stealing that?
No, you feel free. Have it. Go for it.
It's yours now. You can have it along with Permissible Yodas as an upcoming band name. So, I have it on good authority that there could be a free short story if you were to follow such a mailing
There
list.
is. That's right. If you subscribe to my mailing list, the reply email contains a link to download a free prequel short story to The Wild God's Gambit, called The Right Song.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time, Halla. It's been lovely speaking with you and telling stories with you, and hearing your take on all of our mad questions, including the alien being a little bastard.
It's been an utter delight.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La, How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?